It's a former Big 12 rivalry renewed between Colorado and Nebraska. The Huskers still feeling a bit frosty, having lost 14 one-possession games since 2021, the most in the FBS in that span. And Colorado shocking the world last week with its upset of TCU. Deion Sanders, one of many stars, throwing for a school record 510 yards and 4 touchdowns in his Buffs debut. For more on this game, let's welcome in Brian Christopherson of Husker 247 and Adam Munsterteiger of Buff Stampede. Adam, we'll start with you. When Primetime said, "We coming," he wasn't kidding. The college football world officially on notice now. How does Colorado continue this momentum?
I don't know if there's ever been more eyes on the Colorado football program. They had a heyday back in the late 80s, early 90s, but it's just reached a fever pitch around here. The biggest takeaway that I had, though, from the season opening performance at TCU is that this Colorado football team can get quite a bit better. If it was a situation where everybody played perfect football, you'd go, okay, well, maybe they just kind of caught lightning in a bottle on the Saturday, but they left a lot of plays out there. You put up on the board that Deion Sanders had 510 yards passing, and obviously Dylan Edwards, the star true freshman, had 4 touchdowns, but they had opportunities to make more plays in that football game that they didn't capitalize on. And defensively, Colorado gave up 42 points and really struggled against the run. Colorado's defensive performance really came up big when they needed it most at the very end. And they had some big picks from Travis Hunter and Trevor Woods, but that's a unit that can get a lot better as well. So that would be what I would be most encouraged about if I'm a Colorado fan coming out of that opening weekend and following that big win.
And Adam, your background, by the way, stunning. Calling in from Colorado Stadium, which I'm sure will be rocking this weekend for Primetime's first home game with the program. His son, Deion Sanders, one of many quarterbacks who impressed for their new programs last weekend. Unfortunately, Jem Sims not in that same category. 3 interceptions plus 3 sacks for enough negative yardage to cost him a 100-yard rushing game. So, Brian, how does he bounce back?
Yeah, I think they need to get him some high percentage throws early in this game, and he's got to find that connection with Billy Kemp. Billy Kemp is a transfer from Virginia who was brought in here as a wide receiver. He didn't have any catches in the opener. It kind of stunned us. We thought he'd be a guy who maybe had 6 or 7 receptions in that game. So they got to get him on track. And I think he's got to find his tight ends, too. He's got a former top tight end recruit in Thomas Fidone and Nate Borkercher, who were pretty silent against Minnesota. So they've got to find ways to I think maybe you get Jeff out of the pocket a little bit, get him some throws that are kind of layups. And then he's just got to be smarter with the football. He had a bad throw off his back foot that led to an interception. And obviously the one in the end zone right before the half, where's a ball where he had a guy open. But if you don't have a guy open, you just got to throw that away and live for the next down. So he ran the ball very effectively in the first game. He had 91 rushing yards on 19 carries, but 3 picks on 19 passing attempts. That matches how many interceptions he had, over 188 attempts last year. So he's got to have a very clean game for Nebraska to have a chance in this one.
Now, I don't know if you guys fancy the betting markets, but it was fascinating to watch Travis Hunter's Heisman odds as the game progressed last weekend. He opened the season with odds of 150-1, even 300-1 at some places. During the game, those odds moved to 80-1, and now they're some of the shortest out there at 22-1. Now, of course, playing 129 snaps as a two-way player isn't feasible long term. So, Adam, how are they monitoring his snap count?
If we're talking about 99.99% of college football players, I would 100% agree with you that this is not sustainable. But Travis Hunter he's simply built different. And what they're going to do going forward is he's not going to practice much during the week. Obviously, he's going to be in the team meetings and film study and all that stuff. So he's got the mental side of it down. But it's almost kind of like he's going to be a marathon runner on Saturdays, a guy that is going to take it easy throughout the week, get a lot of treatment. Now, that you're exposing yourself when you're out on the football field for that number of plays. There's no doubt about it. But even the way that Travis Hunter hits the turf is graceful. It's a thing of beauty. And so if there's anybody that can do it, it's him. Even after the game, instead of getting an IV, he's in the locker room dancing after playing all those snaps. So it's crazy to say, but I think they can keep this going throughout the season.
He can dance, but I hope he gets that Ivy as well. Brian, between the wide receiver group and Dylan Edwards, Colorado might have one of the best skill groups in the country. So how do you see Nebraska's defense matching up with them?
I think it's a strength-on-strength matchup. I mean, Nebraska's defense is feeling pretty good about itself, even though the team didn't come away with a win. They played really well against Minnesota, tackled about as well as I can remember a Nebraska team doing in the first game. There were very few missed tackles. They held Minnesota to 251 yards and really shut down the running game. Now, obviously, Colorado has some skill weapons. Maybe Minnesota doesn't, although Minnesota has a couple guys I think can play at the next level too. But it's going to come down to, can you get 2 or 3 guys around the ball carrier? You know, as Nebraska's defensive coordinator, Tony White, said, it's easy to make one guy miss. It's not as easy to make 2 miss, and definitely not 3. So Nebraska has to just rally to the football, sort of like they did against Minnesota. And obviously, you gotta lock up Dylan Edwards when you get him in space and hold him to, you know, those 4 or 5 yard runs and not turn them into 50-yard runs. But the thing that could help Nebraska in this game, they tackled a lot in August. They hit a lot, and they were hoping that would pay off as far as opening the season and being strong in that respect. They were against Minnesota. We'll see if they can do it against Colorado's athletes this Saturday.
Now, this is a rivalry that dates all the way back to 1898. Deion Sanders is new to it, but he's going so far as to remove red shirts from his personal merch site. Adam, what are you looking forward to most in this rivalry renewed?
It's just great that there's going to be a rivalry game at Folsom Field, because that's one of the things that it's been taken away from Colorado since they've been in the Pac-12. They tried to manufacture a rivalry with Utah by pointing at the Rumble and the Rockies, but there's simply no animosity between those two football programs. And so Colorado just hasn't had rivalry games. And it's the 100th season of Folsom Field behind here. And Ralphie was not able to run for the spring showcase because it was a little too cold for her. So the first time that Coach Prime runs out behind Ralphie, 100th season at Folsom Field, is going to be against old rival Nebraska. You couldn't set it up and cue it up any better.
Yeah, I don't know if the players sometimes understand what this game means to some of the fans. Maybe they're not old enough, but I am. And I remember Bill McCartney removing they would put Nebraska in red letters on the schedule, really built it up, and Colorado got really good and gave Nebraska all they wanted in those years. I remember a game in '91 that ended in a tie when there were snowballs being thrown on the field as Nebraska was attempting a game-winning field goal. So there's all sorts of memories attached to this one. Both sides have had their moments where they've been able to crow about it. But I definitely, it's a rivalry to me. Any game that makes the other fan base feel just sick to their stomach to see the other team celebrating, that's a rivalry. And I would say this constitutes that.
Guys, we've mentioned a lot of pretty well-known players to this point. What are some under-the-radar players we can watch this week? And Brian, you can start us off here.
Yeah, I would highlight Quinton Newsome, cornerback for Nebraska. He's not under the radar around here where everybody follows the day-to-day practice updates so closely. But Quinton nationally, I think, is a guy who has the skill set to compete at the next level, and he wants to prove that he's one of the best cornerbacks, not only in the Big Ten, but in the country. Well, if you want to do that, this would be a game on this type of stage against those type of receivers like a Travis Hunter, to put your name out there. So this is a big game for him. He's a physical corner too. He's not afraid to tackle. And along with him, I'd highlight Malcolm Hartzog on the other side. He's a smaller corner, and I'm sure Colorado will take their shots at him and test him. He happened to get beat on the late touchdown that Minnesota scored to tie the game. So obviously he's going to want to bounce back. So it's a huge game for Nebraska's secondary. Not only to cover well, but obviously be physical in space and just be good tacklers.
For Colorado, I'm going to go with the cornerback as well, and it's going to be the cornerback that's opposite Travis Hunter. Omarion Cooper, who transferred in from Florida State, is going to get, I wouldn't say picked on because he's a really talented player, but he's going to get a lot of balls thrown at him because I think there's going to be an apprehension to throw in the direction of Travis Hunter as we continue to go through the season. And so he's going to be a key for Colorado's defense because he is a good player. Obviously, there's very few players that can be at the level of Travis Hunter at the cornerback position. So there's some pressure on him to carry it as well on that other side.
All right, a lot of storylines. Should be a fun one to watch. Brian and Adam, thanks so much for joining us. And for more coverage from these guys and the rest of their staffs, please check out Husker247.com and BuffStampede.com for all your recruiting and football news and analysis all season long.